The Miami Hurricanes will beat the North Carolina State Wolfpack if.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. Happy game day eve. I am Alex Donno, your host, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. And we are brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. To help us break down the keys to the game, I want to bring on one of my very dear friends. I go all the way back to the U with this man. We did student radio together at WVUM. He was Sebastian The Ibis. He was in the Ibis suit for 4 years. Rudy Tomarchio. Rudy, how you been, sir?
Thanks for having me on. You know, this may be, I need to get your lighting set up because this is probably the first time in, 20-something years of knowing you that you look more tan than I do.
And I'm also, I have the lighting, like I have my lights like set to tan, and but they're also super bright, so I'm blind after every show that I do. But here I see these like circles in my eyes for the rest of the day. But here we are.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
you're the consummate pro.
Yeah, and so I look at there's a lot of things, and we had the crossover episode yesterday with Locked On Wolfpack, and even those guys admitted NC State doesn't really match up that well with Miami in a lot of areas. Now, there's a reason why we play the games, okay? We've seen North Carolina lose 2 straight games. They just lost to Georgia Tech. Miami lost to Georgia Tech. Like sometimes in this sport, you can't just show up and automatically beat the opponent, and that's why the keys to the game are so important, Rudy. What is your number one key? You go, and then I'll go. Number one key to victory on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's really funny. I like the way the NC State guys said that they were going to try to reverse psychology because whenever you feel too confident, it's like famous last words.
They made me feel terrible because I picked Miami and I'm like, I should have picked NC State.
Well, if things don't go well, you can apologize to them in Monday coaches conference. But yeah, first key to the game. This one's really simple. I think it's something everyone's going to hear. It's just Tyler Van Dyke to stay calm, because if there's one thing you learned out of that, lackluster performance against UVA, Tyler Van Dyke won his first game as a starter for Miami without throwing a touchdown pass. So you can get this done without having to feel like it has to be all on your shoulders. And because they match up so well against NC State, that 3-3-5 defense, Tyler Van Dyke's been here before. He's dissected this defense before. So really, I think it's just focusing on getting your pre-snap read correct and knowing that the guy's going to come open that you're looking for, whether it's in the middle of the field or it's in the seams where 3-3-5s are weak. But also trust your running game and trust your offensive line because you're not getting hit that much.
Yeah, and my first key, it's a little broader, but it's a similar concept. And this is going to be my number one key, really, ever since Miami's 2 losses. Keep the self-inflicted wounds to a minimum. You're better off checking down for 60 minutes than throwing 2 or 3 interceptions, okay? And try and keep the penalties to a minimum as well. I know that that's not always easy for Miami when you've got ACC officials in the game, but, because to me, again, we were talking about this pre-show, Rudy. Again, if Miami does lose this game to NC State, you're probably looking at a 3 or 4 turnover performance by Miami. That's really the path to defeat here, whereas the path to victory is win at the line of scrimmage, which is so obvious. I didn't include that as a key, but win at the line of scrimmage and try not to turn the football over. So limit the self-inflicted wounds is number one for me. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is also a very obvious one. It's for the defense to always keep an eye on number 10, KC Concepcion.
It's a great one.
You need to know where he is at all times because he's most of their offense. I mean, he has over 30 or 40% of the receptions, and they've gotten very creative in how they use him, just like how Miami uses Brashard Smith, running out of the backfield, running in the slot. A lot of watching this tape of NC State, they run a lot of their offense out of that backfield. And it's not just KC Concepcion, but like a lot of movement that comes out starts in the backfield, whether it's the tight end lined up as an H-back, if it's Concepcion back there, if it's 2 backs and they're leading with the running back and then handing off to KC. Keep an eye on him, and you should have a you should feel better about yourself out there. And if you stop him, they can't really, they're not going to gain a lot of momentum.
Yeah, no, living in KC is a great one. And even the Locked On Wolfpack guys, Kenton is sometimes saying like maybe they rely on him a little bit too much. And I'm sure that they're going to be trying to rely on him as much as possible tomorrow night. For me, I also stay with Miami's defense for my second key, and that shut down NC State's running game, which on paper shouldn't be that difficult for Miami. The Hurricanes have the 9th ranked rushing defense in America, while NC State's rushing offense is 93rd at 133 yards per game. And North Carolina State's leading rusher on the season is the quarterback that they benched, Brennan Armstrong. None of their running backs have more than 249 yards on the year. So, with our luck, this is going to be the game that they break out and rush for 250 yards. But Miami needs to limit NC State's running game, because then kind of the carryover from that is you force an inexperienced MJ Morris at quarterback to beat you. So that's my second key. What's your third?
So my third is also defensive related. It's a little bit of a play on winning the line of scrimmage. Watching a lot of tape of NC State, I think this defensive line, this defensive front can have a lot of success on that left side. They've shuffled a lot between the left guard and left tackle. They usually have trouble even with one-on-one matchups. And if you watch a lot of NC State's protection, their running backs and their tight ends are not the best pass blockers. The NC State guys will tell you that too. I think you could see a lot of success there, whether it's just rotating your defensive end. So we're looking at Rueben Hurricane Bain. We're looking at Branson Deen. We're looking at Jared Harrison Hunt. We're looking at Jafari Harvey. All of them should have a great time on that left side and just keep rotating them in.
I love that. And okay, so my third and final key is, and you were talking about KC Concepcion on the NC State side. Miami needs to get their Concepcion more involved in this game. Get your speed on the field. Brashard Smith, Cristobal admitted, probably didn't have enough touches last week. Now, he did say also it's hard to get a guy like that enough touches in any game, but I want to see number 0 getting even more involved in the game plan, kind of like he was 2 weeks ago against Clemson. I definitely want to see as much of Ray Joseph as possible. And, if there's a way to get Chris Johnson on the field, even if you're lining him up in the slot, not necessarily in at running back, I want to get as much speed on the field as possible, because again, Rudy, I don't want, if North Carolina State's dropping into zone and like daring Tyler Van Dyke to throw deep into double coverages, take what's given to you. If you're looking at speedsters underneath, if you can get the tight ends involved in this game, yes, please. Not everything has to go for 40, 50 yards downfield. So I'm fine getting my speedy players on the field.
Yeah, take what's given to you. And at the same time, like they don't do the best job at disguising their coverages. So part of the key of staying calm is utilize some of those hard snap counts. It's going to be a loud environment. They're going to creep up really quickly if they're blitzing. And obviously with a 3-3-5, it's high risk, high reward. So they're going to blitz a lot. And also you're going to see a lot of that bear front, those, basically make a large line of 5 people. So you're going to see a lot of that, and you have ways of exploiting it. You're going to see your matchups. You're going to see one-on-ones with your receivers. And at the same time, you can also run really well to the edge. So having a nice, healthy rotation of running backs, our offensive line, outside of maybe a couple of plays against UVA and a couple of plays against Georgia Tech, has looked really, really strong in terms of timing and getting those blocks right. And that's where Duke had a lot of success against NC State. So we're kind of built similarly on the whole line to them.
Our guest today, Rudy, he was Sebastian The Ibis for 4 years. So, we got to get some stories from inside that bird suit. I also want to get kind of Rudy's report card on the season so far, 8 games in, and how much, because he's made spreadsheets about this, folks, how much the injuries are or are not affecting Tyler Van Dyke this year. We're only getting started, man. You want to keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. Guys, buying last-minute tickets to games should not be a stressful experience. It never is at game time. You can get great deals. If you're going up to NC State, you can get great deals for the Louisville game at home the following week. Gino Torretta is going to be honored. Guys, back at the Virginia game, Miami's last home game, most recent home game, they had $1 tickets. I was so thankful that my guy Chris, who listens to the show, was thanking me for alerting him to the $1 tickets at game time. You shouldn't have to worry about getting tickets to the next big event, whether it's a sporting event, a concert, a comedy show. They have it all at Game Time. And I love when you sign into Game Time, they pop the deals in your area right there on your screen. So you don't have to waste your time looking at events in other parts of the country. You can see the pictures of views right from your seats, exactly what you're going to see from your seats. And guys, the Game Time guarantee, this is what makes you know you're always getting the best deal. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's the Game Time guarantee. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. And guys, if you missed Locked On College Football Kickoff Live, the replay is available. We take you through all the big games, all the big storylines for this weekend, week 10 in college football. You want to check that out. It's available on ours, Locked On Canes, and every YouTube channel along the Locked On College network. So, Rudy, you know as well as anybody, there have been so many Hurricane quarterback debates and quarterback complaints in recent years. Some people just wanted to turn it over to Emory Williams, who, managed the game very well against Clemson, made some big throws. Tyler Van Dyke returned the following week, had a couple of interceptions. Miami still beat Virginia in spite of that. I do know he's playing hobbled, okay? In fact, Halloween night, I was talking to one of my neighbors. I wear Hurricanes gear wherever I go, and he's like, yeah, that Tyler Van Dyke doesn't look healthy to me, he said. And I'm thinking, like, is it that simple? Like, am I not giving enough credit to TVD playing through injuries? How much do you think those injuries are affecting him, Rudy?
It's really funny because we had this discussion over the weekend, even during the game on Saturday. We're watching, it looks like the poor guy can't step into the throw because he's probably hurting. Xavier Restrepo had a great quote earlier this week where he mentioned, we're all playing hurt. Basically, the only snap you have healthy is the first one of the year. And then after that, you're playing with something nagging you. So, did a little bit of a stat breakdown on TVD for his entire career at Miami, because I think it's one of those things where just like our expectations over the year has changed, our impressions of TVD also changes from game to game, which is not always fair. Going into the season, it was, are we going to see 2021 Tyler Van Dyke? Oh, he really was hampered by Josh Gaddis in that system. Rhett Lashlee was really the great place for him. And after looking at all the numbers, I broke it down a couple ways. I broke down what his performances were when he was 100% healthy, meaning there were no injuries disclosed.
Right.
And then obviously mentioning games where he's hurt, which is either he was hurt in the game or it was very clear, because there's a couple of games there where you don't really get a lot of depending on the injury. Obviously you're not going to be playing a lot. There were 2 games in a row where Tyler was only 4 for 8 because he only was in for a couple series. He was so hurt they were trying to give him pain relief before the game to see if he was good to go. That situation is very different now. But what I noticed, what was really interesting, was he's very similar to 2021 right now through the course of the entire season. Like those first 4 games, the last couple of games, the numbers are similar. The difference is he has less attempts this year, obviously, because with the Shannon Dawson, Mario Cristobal offense, you want to lean on your offensive line. You want to run the ball. So he's not having to throw the ball 35, 40 times to win. So he's more accurate than he's ever been, even with the last couple of games.
Right.
He's still as accurate as ever been because he's now over 70% completion. Granted, he had an excellent game against Texas A&M. He had an excellent game against Bethune-Cookman that padded the stats a little bit. He was good out of that 1 interception against Miami of Ohio. He was excellent at Temple. He threw for almost 400 yards at North Carolina. It's just 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So he's been kind of the same guy. So in terms of what you're going to see from Tyler, the only difference, I guess, really is I think it's just how comfortable he is going into the game, and we'll see where things go. Because when he heats up, it's usually, even in the games where he's performed really well, he's had some struggles early, whether it be balls bad at the line of scrimmage, but he ends up just starting to throw all over the place because his protection is there and because the guys come open. And that's something that you can look at the stats for this year. His jersey's never been cleaner. They're averaging less than a sack a game on Tyler Van Dyke.
And that's obviously, and I think that's one of the areas for frustration is, he throws these interceptions. I think all but one of the last 7 he's thrown have been plenty of time to throw clean pocket. And it's interesting your dive on those numbers, because again, like what I look at is I think Van Dyke's biggest problem has just been consistency, right? Because like you said, Canes fans have a hard time believing like the big picture of what he's done this year, because he's still, Pro Football Focus still has him top 4 quarterbacks in terms of all total numbers and efficiency. And fans are like, what are they talking about? This guy's been terrible. Yeah, but he was so good the first 4 games, and he's still over 70% on the season. We just need him to find some of that consistency again. So I like that. In terms of where Miami is 8 games into the year, Rudy, it's hard for some Hurricanes fans, myself included, to, forget what happened against Georgia Tech with, the kneel down that wasn't, and then the fumble that shouldn't have been, and then the breakdown in coverage that should have never happened, all the things that led to that loss. So you look and say this team really should be 7-1, but even at 6-2, they're right there still along my expectation. My preseason pick was 8-4. That's, it's very much attainable. Depending on what happens this week, of course, is gonna go a long way to telling me whether they can still go 8-4 or not. How do you grade these first 8 games? Have they met, exceeded, or fallen short of your expectations?
Yeah, it's really funny because we're all very much the same in terms of we have expectations at the beginning of the year, and then we watch them play, and those expectations go up, and then they sometimes go down. And the last couple of years, really, our expectations have been every game is going to be an adventure from here on out. And we started this season kind of thinking the same thing. Every game's going to be an adventure. They start out 4-0, and you're saying, well, wait a minute. We can get in the college football playoff. We could play for the conference title. We're looking a hell of a lot better. And then, a letdown happens. And yeah, the not taking a knee was, we're all still very much hurt by that. And the officiating, as we know in the ACC. But really, they could be 6-1, 7-1. They could be 2 losses, I think, is still doing pretty well for the season with all things considered. North Carolina just presented a lot of trouble that night with running fast, which is something that I feel optimistic about going into this game, is that with an inexperienced quarterback and MJ Morris, you don't really have to worry about a team going fast outside of maybe the opening 2 series for them, because they're probably going to script a couple plays to try to do that. But I think overall, you have to feel really good about where this team is compared with last year as well. Like, they're playing more physical. The offensive line is night and day with the additions they made in the transfer portal and some freshmen stepping up. You got to be happy with the defense minus a couple of breakdowns. Like, yes, there was a lapse in coverage, and the DB fell on that last play, which was heartbreaking to see, but they don't quit. And that's the nice thing about watching this team, because there's plenty of times in the last 15 years of watching Hurricane football and watching last year where they go down early and that's it. They're not really going to come back. Maybe they get some points in garbage time, but that's just to make the score respectable, not close.
We're going to continue the conversation when we come back with Rudy Tomarchio. And I have to talk about his past, because he used to put on that Sebastian The Ibis suit or the Miami Maniac suit as well at baseball games. And he used to do the damn thing. We're talking with Sebastian The Ibis right now. Keep it locked right here. We got to get some stories on Locked On Canes. Guys, I hope you are keeping it locked this football season to Prize Picks. This is the most fun I've ever had, winning up to 25 times my money during football season. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. The easiest and most exciting way to play DFS, because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in, guys. With basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball. You can go cross game and cross sport from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3 points made plus receptions. There's so many options. And guys, you can 25 times your money. You can turn $10 into $250 with just a couple clicks. And Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So guys, go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LockedOnCollege and they're going to match your first deposit up to $100. Prize Picks truly is daily fantasy made easy. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. And guys, if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, make sure to sign up for our Locked On Canes Insiders text messaging service. Click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. Then you can opt in for $4.99 a month. And I want to remind you guys, we have dedicated this week of shows to our friend Otto Liller. You probably knew him, and you definitely knew him as War Beast in the chat, because Otto, I miss him so much. He passed away a week ago, tragically, and so positive, such a great influence on this community. The man is an American hero, retired brigadier general, so humble, because I knew he was a military guy, had no idea he was so high. He probably knew where the aliens are. I remember he took a trip to Roswell, and he sent me some photos, like out and about in the town. I didn't know he was probably there to study the alien technology. I don't know what was going on there. I'm sure it was classified, but we miss our friend so much, Otto K. Liller. May he rest in peace. And one of his good friends, who's also a great friend of ours, Al Picon, has given us an opportunity to get memorial bracelets for War Beast. I'm going to include a link in the show description below, the Till Valhalla project, Till Valhalla. And they do an awesome job raising money for veterans and suicide prevention. It really is a great cause. And I have ordered my memorial bracelet for Otto Liller, a.k.a. War Beast. I'm going to include a link in the show description below so you guys can do that as well. So may he rest in peace, War Beast. And we got our guy Rudy Tomarchio with us, former Sebastian The Ibis. First of all, man, noon game in September. Did you ever pass out? Like, how hot was that?
So I never passed out, but there's plenty of war stories out there to mention just how bad it is in that suit at that time of the year. Noon, we don't really have many noon kickoffs anymore. There was none for our team this season. None for the Sebastians this season. Lucky them too. But I mean, nothing's really changed in the sense of getting ready. You just hydrate like hell the night before. You don't drink, and the kids stay the same, so they're still learning the same lessons 20-something years later. So none of us ever passed out, but the worst I had seen was actually my first year on the field was the Wake Forest game. The Sebastian who was running out of the tunnel, he makes it out of the tunnel. He makes it to the 50, hits the big spell out after the coin toss, immediately goes into the med tent, into the medical center. It says, because half of his side was like locked up and cramping from what happened. So we're giving him fluids, man. And because I'm a freshman, this is like my third game on the field. Wow. It's like the game after this one behind me, where it was Colorado. I'm just like 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out, watching what's going on, because if we end up getting a turnover, if we end up scoring, like, hey man, you're back out there. So yeah, get your fluids in as quickly as you can. It's just something you have to be aware of, and it's something you're prepared for, because it's well over 100 degrees. It's over 110 in the costume when it's really, really hot.
Was being Sebastian, was that something you always dreamed? Because I know you were a lifelong Miami fan well before you got on campus. Like, was being in the bird suit, is that something you always dreamed of doing?
Well, my first game as a Miami fan was Citadel in 1996. And it's something that one of my best friends still to this day, I go to games with him all the time, Michael Dobson. He brought me to my first Hurricanes games. And obviously, I'm a kid that, I'm first generation American born, first generation 4-year university. My parents didn't know football. My mom knew of Joe Namath in New York. My dad is soccer, boxing, Formula One, doesn't know American football. So going and learning about these things, one thing when there's a lull in the action was watching Sebastian. And because my friend, Michael, his mom was in PR at UM, she mentions one day in passing when we're going into high school, hey, Sebastian gets a full scholarship. And
I didn't know that. Wow.
Well, that's part of the story. It's that
Oh,
I first saw the one. Oh, I could do that. Like, I'm watching him all the time. I know how to do that. He's really cool. And obviously, like, I wasn't a high school mascot or anything. Like, I this is what I want to do when I got to college. And I went tryouts and I got it. I was one of, at that time there was 4 of us or 5 of us. Now there's 6 or 7 because they do so many things over the course of the year. After the first meeting, post Sebastian tryout meeting, Connie Nickel was the SWA at the time, senior women's administrator. Her first job at Miami was Sebastian back in the early 90s. So she was working with John Ruth. And then with the students, once that came back, I stayed back afterwards saying, hey, so is there any paperwork I have to fill out? Like, for what? Like, to have your information? Go, yeah, like scholarship wise, all that. And she looks at me and just goes, what scholarship? and I immediately, like, first thing after leaving the athletic department was, I guess I'm gonna have to take out a couple more loans.
Oh, you thought you were getting a full ride? You thought you were getting a full ride?
I'm like, all right, let's go. Like, we're here. I don't have to worry about anything. Maybe I can take some of that money and live on campus.
Oh my
God.
I
just ended up living in your guys' dorms. Like, I know you commuted too, but like our friends, all fraternity brothers and stuff like that, we just hung out with them all the time. So yeah.
That must have been a real disappointment. How does someone who worked PR at UM get that wrong? Like, oh yeah, you have full scholarship to be what?
To this day, Sebastians are still, like, their whereabouts, their functions are still very secretive. Like, the administrators obviously know who they are, but at the same time, it's like, someone would come out and say, hey, can we have Sebastian come to this? Go, oh yeah, but you have to fill out all of this. Or you have another organization that says, I want him coming to, my kid's birthday or a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, wedding, whatever it is. Like, there's always something going on behind the scenes that not everybody's going to know about. And honestly, UMPR has a lot bigger fish to fry than worrying about what Sebastian does and the story and the history behind it. So John Ruth has done a really good job with the Hall of Fame of kind of showing some of the Sebastian, like, lore and imaging. DJ Williams with his Modelo campaigns doing a great job of telling that story of Mark of a Fighter, Sebastian, last animal to leave before a storm, first one to come back after it passes. Like, people are learning some of that, but to this day, they still get called a duck. It's not a duck.
No, it's
even
not.
From our own fans. Yeah. Like,
well,
come on, man.
Now you mentioned it's not all sporting events. Like, sometimes Sebastian gets called in, hired for private functions. Like, what's the weirdest type of event you ever worked at?
Oh wow, that's a good question. Weirdest thing I think I was ever called to do. Probably a couple of, like, small church functions where I'm thinking, like, oh, is it like a field day or something? No, it was like a straight up meet and greet with Sebastian, which super happy to do, community outreach, but it was one of those things where I'm like, this is an interesting place to be, because I'm sure we do a lot of unsightly things on the field. Obviously everything is still family friendly, but like we're not exactly the biggest role model for kids in terms of the athletic competition of, like, getting in people's faces and snapping the beak back and forth. Like, that's one thing I thought, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then also anything that's kind of like off campus where there isn't a direct sports related piece to it. It's like, okay, I don't know why I'm here right now, but I'm happy to mess around with it. Like, there's a couple of those events where it's like nobody knows who you are. Maybe like one kid, but at the same time, it's an opportunity to be like, all right, cool. Well, they're going to know who I am by the end of this day.
Wow. And just so people know, you were Sebastian from what, 04 to 07 during so Coker into Randy Shannon.
Yeah, Coker into Randy Shannon, last game in the Orange Bowl, another heartbreaker that we were there for. But yeah, those are the years, which is really fun because that was also, like, now is the time where all of these guys who we shared a locker room with are getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. So you had Brandon Merriweather this past weekend. You had Eric Winston. Eric Winston was one of Sebastian's biggest fans in road games because you could be sitting there in the locker room just, like, ready to run out, and he'll look over at you like, hey, Sebastian. Like, what? And he wants that beak break, and it just put the biggest smile on his face. And at that time, Eric Winston, he was already 6'5", 6'4", whatever he is, but he had long hair. He was offensive lineman size. Now he's back down to, like, tight end size. This is an enormous man who's getting really, really happy just by you doing one little simple movement. And it's always hysterical to see.
I love that. We'll have Rudy on again because I'm sure there's more stories to tell. Awesome job, man. And thanks everyone so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. If you missed the early part of the episode, we gave you keys to victory against North Carolina State. Remember to check out College Football Kickoff Live. If you missed it, the replay is available right here on Locked On Canes YouTube. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.